All right, good afternoon. Want to welcome you to an exciting sneak peek today. We have a very special event, and I'm excited, especially today, to get you introduced to someone that you may have heard about, but have not yet had a chance to meet. And I'm really super excited to get you introduced to Dave Green today. And real quickly, just a couple of things that I'll mention right up top. We were doing some chit chat here ahead of today's event, just before we got started. But I will let you know we certainly have a lively chat going. We don't have huge crowds here today, so it's kind of the hometown crowd today. And but we are recording, of course, for the benefit of anybody who is not able to be here with us live. We're going to do Q&A. And so as usual, what I'll ask is certainly feel free to chat during the event in the webinar chat. But if you have a question related to the content for today, then I'm going to ask you to pop that into the Q&A in Zoom so that we can separate the questions out from what we have in terms of just the chat and so forth. And just a real quick kind of what to expect for today. We're going to do some introductions here. I want you guys to get acquainted with Dave. Then we're going to talk about migrations and deployments and give you a sneak peek. This is a very exclusive sneak peek of a feature that is not yet available. And so this is one of those rare moments where we're showing you something that that is actually in development. There's a small subset of the universe that has access to this feature. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But and then we're going to talk about some of what's coming next for SolidWP. I think there's some really cool stuff coming up, and then we'll definitely get into Q&A. We'll probably mix and match Q&A and what's next here. I've got them in sequence there on this, but we'll kind of sneak around a little bit. But for right now, what I'd like to do, Dave, let's do this. Most of you all know that are here. Most of you all know that I was responsible for product for SolidWP. That's how we got introduced to each other here with you folks at the Academy. And in February, a bunch of stuff changed all at once, or at least internally at Stellar, there were a bunch of announcements made. I think the changes took longer than that. But over the span of, what would you say, Dave, a couple of months from February, late February to maybe, I don't know, April sometime.
Yeah, the full transition's been a couple of months for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so I actually handed off the responsibilities for product management for SolidWP to Dave. And so, Dave, let's do this. I know a little bit about you, but let's start with this amazing accent that you have, and let's talk about where you are in the world right now.
I am in Manchester in the north of England. Definitely in the top 10 most kind of rain blessed parts of the world. But yeah, I'm based in Manchester.
Yeah, it's cool, and I want to also talk about your background because you've actually been, I think, in product as a product manager longer than I have, or maybe it was about the same time. I don't remember. I feel like it was. I feel like you may have a little more product management background than me. But before that, let's talk about like what brought you to here, your sort of WordPress history, what you've done with most of your adult life here so far.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of the WordPress journey, I started off as a kind of, I guess, a WordPress hacker, just hacking it to use for personal gain or for friends and family. 2010, I started as an engineer, so initially kind of a front end engineer working on WordPress themes, building sites for customers. So started off in the agency space, very high volume WordPress sites. So kind of really efficient, efficient work, getting designs out really quickly and builds, and then just gradually progressed into the more kind of full stack development. Front end and back end. Moved to another agency where I was for 7 years, where that was more certainly not the high volume sites. That was more kind of medium to large builds, slower pace, more kind of enterprise level stuff as well. But at that point, I actually had kind of co-ownership of an agency along with a few colleagues. So I've worn kind of multiple hats in terms of the engineering side, in terms of day-to-day business operations, and then Around about, I say mid to late 2021, I decided to step away from the agency world. I'd given it a good long, period of my life. And after a brief gap, I came on board at Stella working for Iconic, one of our other brands, as a developer. Couple of years working on some of our products like Woo Thumbs and Iconic. And then the opportunity presented itself to step into product role, for Iconic. So basically, that's where my product experience, began. So we're talking kind of late 23 was when I stepped into that kind of hybrid product and dev role. And inevitably, that led me to being offered the position to take over from your good self as
Hmm.
product lead for Solid. So big shoes to fill, I will say. Trying my best to fill them. But yeah, that's my journey really. Kind of strong agency background, but I always wanted to move into product and SaaS based, development and shipping, good stuff for people in that area. So kind of gone full pivot from one side to the other now.
Yeah, yeah. So I like the fact that you and I have a lot of similarities in our background. Actually, you were more of an engineer than I ever was, but we both spent time in the agency world, and I think you know that for the Solid Academy folks that are here right now today, this recording will, I'm sure, be seen by others. But this group that's here today is entirely composed of people who are building sites as professionals for clients. And so
Yeah.
some are probably more likely to categorize themselves as freelancers. Others would say, no, we own an agency, operate an agency. So you've been in the trenches. You know what it is to
Yeah.
deal with clients. uh,
Agency is in my blood, definitely. I can never take that away.
yeah, and it's such an important piece, I think, too, for when we think about, especially a product suite like Solid, a product family like Solid WP. It's so important to bring that perspective to this
Sure.
work. In some ways, like I used to joke, it was kind of a punchline that I had joined the other side. You know, that I had gone from building sites to now working for the people that make software. But in reality, especially in product leadership, you know, it's so key to have an understanding, I think, of what it is to be in that space and to know that, you know, building
Yeah.
sites and working with clients and especially in this like rapidly changing environment that we're in, like things are changing so fast with marketing
Hmm.
and with, you know, how we market ourselves, how our clients achieve marketing results, how websites even exist in the world today, what role WordPress has. There's a lot of things in motion right now, but
Yeah.
um, it's an interesting piece. So I'm excited to have you take over, and I will say I've it's been a delight to get to know you. I think we should also mention you still are wearing multiple hats, so you're not just handling product for Solid, but you're also involved in a couple of other brands still.
Yeah, yeah. I still wear the iconic hat, but Solid is certainly the larger of the two hats that I'm wearing for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's an all-encompassing kind of a deal, and I will say, I one of the sort of painful parts of the last few weeks for me has just been I'm out of touch. I don't know. I'm not involved at all in the day to day of what Solid is building. But the things that we're going to showcase today are things that I did get to work on, you know, before and during this handoff, and so I am super
Yeah.
excited about this. We had a question or a comment in the chat a minute ago from someone who was like, "Well, you know, um, if this isn't ready, then why are we talking about it?" It actually is ready in the sense that there's a piece here that's available, and I'm going to ask you while you watch today and while you take a look at what we have to show, I'm going to ask you a little later if you have any interest in having early access to this, because we have made some provisions for that if it's interesting, but also there's some stuff that's rapidly being developed, and I think this will all make a lot more sense in a few minutes. So, but we
Mhm.
wanted to give you a sneak peek as far as what's underway right now. And so, Dave, I think the next thing maybe to do for the sake of just, you know, moving forward with this is to talk
Mhm.
about migrations and deployments, and just like maybe can we just do a quick dive into how we're thinking about migrations versus deployments, and maybe, and I'm happy to provide any context as well, to
Hmm.
participate here. But like, where does this fit in the solid universe? For today's event, we referred to this as a backups next gen thing, migrating
Hmm.
sites with backups next gen, and that's not precisely correct. It's not precisely
Hmm.
accurate. It's not inaccurate, but it's also not precisely accurate. So can you, like, how about we just start there? Let's talk about kind of how we think about deployments and migrations, and like what this is all about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of the way that we're framing this piece of migrations, deployments, and also environments, which we'll touch on a little bit later, it's really more of a central pro piece because it falls more firmly under site management. Yes, it does use our, let's say, quote unquote, backups API under the hood, to facilitate these migrations and deployments. But yeah, it's really much more of a piece that we're going to be framing as part of central, rather than explicitly being something tied to backups for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and I will say, like, it was when a year ago we were working on backups next gen. I think we released it in something like August, if I'm not mistaken, of last year. Backups next gen came to life, and one of the early conversations we had is we were like, okay, hey, this is all working. Like, what's the next thing we might want to do? And it was like, it would be pretty straightforward. It's all famous last words. Pretty straightforward to use all this infrastructure we've built to do things like migrate sites from one place to another. And there's actually been a workaround. We've talked about this on Academy calls in the past. There's actually a way to use backups next gen, to back up in one place and restore in another. But it's hacky, and it's fraught,
Yeah.
and it could be done. So do you want to, I don't know what would be better for you to maybe go ahead and show your screen, or for us to talk about, the sort of what the goal of this was, from the
Yeah.
standpoint of like improving that hacky, thing that was not a pleasant experience.
Yeah, sure. I think we can touch on that whilst kind of describing the differences between the two as well. So,
Sure.
like fundamentally, deployments are, you have two sites connected. You want to duplicate, copy, the files in the DB that exists on, your source site, site A onto site B, and just do that in a kind of really quick, frictionless, manner. There's no destructive changes on the source site at all. It's just literally just like almost like a replication across to the other site. Migrations is similar. There's still file and DB, transfers happening, and also, string replacements to make sure that the site address is updated. But with migrations, it's more about the DNS piece as well, and also disconnecting the site and making all the necessary changes in central to kind of reflect that, hey, we've now left the source site A, and we've now moved everything to the destination on site B. So deployments and migrations are very, very similar, but there's, like, subtle kind of nuance between the two in terms of when you would use those.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So like, I think a simple way often to think about it is like, I'm on host A. Let's call it Bluehost for today, just to pick a random one out of the hat, and I'm gonna move to a new hosting provider. Maybe that's Nexus, right? Just to mention the home team here, right? So we've all done this before, right? There's lots of different ways to migrate sites, and then there are plugins that do this, and all of that sort of thing. And when we first started having conversations about it, one of the things that came up right away was that, our engineering team, and most of the people who are here have met Timothy, by the way. So they've heard from Timothy, but Timothy especially was like, a migration is just a specialized form of a deployment. And I was like, well, what in the
Yeah.
world? Why would you, that just didn't make any sense to me at all at first. I was like, it's kind of the other way around, right? Like, if you're going to migrate a site, you have to do all these things, but if you're going to deploy, that feels like, a specialized version of a migration. And Timothy was like, nope, you've got that exactly backwards from an engineering point of view.
Yeah.
And so that was a fun conversation that day, for sure.
Yeah. That's a familiar conversation that I think I've had as well.
Yeah, but from an engineering perspective, I think that was an interesting piece. And as you said, right, but in both situations, if you're moving from one host to another, or if you're deploying, you have to take the content of your website and make a copy in another place. It's just a
Yep.
question of like what are the user experience components and what are the outcomes, and they're a little different from that point of view. And
Yeah.
um, and so yeah,
What
go
are the
ahead.
additional steps that need to be taken as well? Other things that need to be boxed off to complete the migration process, as opposed to the deployment is just a little bit simpler in that respect. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, precisely. Like, under the hood, a migration is actually a deployment, but with a couple of extra pieces. Um,
yeah.
Yeah, and so can we talk about for a second, like what might be a situation in which someone might use the concept of deployments?
In terms of using deployments, say that um, you have two sites set up, and you basically just want to do a straight replication, from A to B. You're just moving. You're not really wanting to remove the site from central. Say, you've built the site on one server, but you actually want to move it to a separate server, that's
Yeah,
already connected. Yeah,
that's a great moment there is like everybody here builds sites for clients, and a lot of times we don't we build them in a temporary location, right? We build them on a maybe a subdomain, and sometimes we have an actual permanent staging environment set up.
yeah.
And so we might have like, let's just, I don't know if you have davegreen.com, but I'm going to pretend that you do for the
I
sake of,
tried many years ago.
yeah, davidjohnson.com, there was no way. Forget it. It turns out that David or Dave is a very common name. But yeah, so if you have staging.davegreen.com, let's say, and you're developing a new feature there, and then or you're building the site, maybe it's just in development, it's new.davegreen.com, and then there comes a moment where you're like, I'm going to take the changes I've made and take them to production,
Yeah,
right? Or
yeah,
maybe I need to build a new feature, but I don't want to build it in production. And so I'm going to
yeah,
take my production site and I'm going to deploy that to a development or a staging
yeah,
location, let's say. And
yeah,
then they both continue to live on. I'm not moving anything from the standpoint of like, the live site is still the live site. Nothing has changed in that regard, but I'm going to have two persistent places. And right now, that means in terms of Solid Central, that means we've got two sites connected to Central.
hmm
And that I think is the exciting part about what's coming is that it won't necessarily be sites in the not too distant future. But somebody mentioned like, hey, different hosts. The WP Engine was called out here, which is true. They have an excellent deployment too. They do, as long as you're deploying from WP Engine to WP Engine, that's true.
yeah,
And there are other hosts that do this as well. Nexus has staging sites and deployment between the two. And even cPanel has in the
mm,
WP toolkit has a pretty nice tool set there. But as soon as you want to have an environment that is not on the same host, or if you're
yeah,
doing something a little more sophisticated, and this is something I ran into, you probably ran into this on the enterprise scale with the agency work that you did. We
hmm
found that often there would be a virtualized server that would be production, and there would be a completely separate virtualized server that would be development or staging, let's say.
yeah, yeah.
And
Lived and breathed that for years. Yeah,
yeah, and so often in that situation, if you're going to deploy from one environment to another, you're stuck. Either you have to use tools that come from your host, or you have to do a lot of code. It turns out
yeah.
like there's a lot of custom, automation
There's
and
an overhead associated with the process that isn't always like the most desirable thing to have to do.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and that's the beauty of what we're offering here, is that we are host agnostic. It doesn't matter where you're hosted, as long as we can successfully connect, we'll take care of the rest as part of the process.
And that's what I kind of think is a little bit exciting to me. I think one of the things that keeps people from using a true staging environment, let's say WordPress updates, that you want to test, right? And one of the things that makes this painful to do is exactly this. It's the deployment process. So like let's say you run your WordPress updates and you find, well, actually I have to make some changes to custom code in the theme. I have to update some stuff because like there's a compatibility problem or whatever. And as soon as you do that in one environment, then you're like, well, I have a choice. I can either go run the same updates in production and make the same code changes manually in production, or I can, do a bunch of engineering work, and either I'm capable of that myself, but I don't want to have to, maintain custom code all the time to do it, or I'm going to use some
Yeah.
complex form of GitHub Actions or other, automation tools like that. Or I'm going to pay an engineer to do it. Like it just feels like it gets messy pretty quickly if
Yeah.
you're either not using host specific tools or if you're doing it the old fashioned way
Yeah.
with a lot of engineering.
Yeah. And the beauty of this is as well that we're leveraging an infrastructure that we already have in place that was developed for NextGen and obviously works seamlessly with Central. So we haven't had to really reinvent the wheel as such. We're just using what we already have and building on top of that, which is good in terms of the speed we can get this to market.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Well, do you how do you feel about giving us a sneak peek?
Yeah, sure. Just need to get the screen share
Yeah, yeah. While you're doing that, I'm gonna just read through the
going.
stuff here. Yep, we are about to show a demo. Stacy said, "Bring back backup, buddy." I appreciate that comment, Stacy. One of the items that was discussed was like, hey, there is the set of tools that was built in PHP for Backup Buddy, and it turns out that if you can still use some of the tools that are there. Obviously, Backup Buddy is still alive and well and kicking, but the or Backup Buddy, Solid Backups Legacy, as it's now known, still available there. But one of the things that you quickly run into when you're dealing with doing any kind of deployments at scale is that PHP comes with its own set of problems, and we have an issue of WordPress installations and needing to rely on WordPress to do which Backup Buddy always did, right? It relied on WordPress itself to help execute any of the restoration process, let's say. So you would back up in one location and then restore in the other with Backup Buddy. And there were some deployment tools in Backup Buddy, and they also had their own sort of difficulties. And so as we know, if we can do this just the same way that we did with backups next gen, the idea was that there would be a direct connection to the server. It wouldn't rely on WordPress to say run a backup. Similarly, we're not in a situation where we need to have WordPress even available fully in order for us to do things with the backups API. So we have some opportunities here to really make some of the stuff work at a much more powerful level. And so that's one thing I'm excited about. When you're ready to share your screen, man, go for it.
David, you're gonna have to take over the screen share. Zoom is not playing nicely with my machine at
Oh,
all, I am afraid. So
we do have these issues sometimes with Zoom. So let's do this. I will share my screen again.
probably because Zoom's aware that I use Google Meet so much that it developed a dislike for me.
Yeah, probably so. All right. Is everyone seeing Solid Central right now? That would be the next question.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Super. Well, we've got a site connected here, and so Dave, I'll drive obviously
Yeah.
since I'm sharing my screen, but I'll have you kind of lead us here. We have a demo account of Solid Central. This is Solid Central production, by the way, so we're showing you something that is actually in Solid Central already. And
Yeah.
there are certain users that have access to this. And if you all are interested in access to this, which is one of the questions I want to ask here in just a little bit, then we'd like to talk about what it might look like for you all to have access to this as well. But so here we are. I have a site now. I will say I didn't think this through. We connected the site to Central and then gave it a custom subdomain. And so if you visit the site, you will see that it is not actually a Nexus site anymore. Actually, you can't see that because I'm not showing the URL bar here. Let me show the URL bar. So you'll see this is academydemo.ithem.es. But because we had already connected it to Central, Central hasn't updated its subdomain information, so it thinks the site is still at a slightly different location. But
Yeah, that's
um,
something we can pick up as a bit of polish, I think, before release.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So there's a deploy button here, and like I said, if you are signed into Solid Central today, you won't see this, but we'll talk more about what it might look like for this to be turned on for you here in a little bit. But we have this deploy button here on the site screen, and this is where we get started with deploy or migrate. And so we have these two, and I'm gonna let you talk here. As it's such a habit, man. If I'm running the mouse, I'll start talking.
Yeah, so this is where we can kick off either the deployment or the migration. So, yeah, just to say, we've got two sites set up on Nexus. One is a site that David commonly uses, and this is a brand new one that we've just spun up today. So the plan is that we're going to migrate from this to the pre-existing site that David had. So, yeah, if you want to walk us through into the migration, and something to say as well in terms of the UI and UX here, we have a handful of tasks in terms of like general polish for this flow. So this flow, as you see, is not a one-to-one to what we'll have when this goes public. Just to just drop that comment in there. But initially, this is just giving users some information for them to be informed on the migration process. I can say that we're going to be dropping a bit more of an interactive element into this, more of a kind of, if you like, an animated overview of what the steps are. That's something that we're currently working on at the moment. But yeah, initially, we just need to educate and make sure everybody's aware. This is the process that you're about to engage in. These are the steps. And then if everybody's happy and digested that, we can continue and move on.
Yeah, this just gives you the quick overview, and so there's a point here at which user action is required, and
Yeah.
so and then the system is going to do some stuff. So I just didn't expand all of this before, but yeah,
Yeah.
this kind of gives you a quick look at at how the process is about to go.
Yeah, we had a meeting a couple of weeks back, and we all agreed, engineering and product, we agreed we can just improve the UX of the screen a little bit and bring a bit more of a modern kind of interactive element to it. So this is definitely not the final modal slide for the kind of information piece. That's definitely going to be improved before we roll this out.
Yeah, and I'll just mention, I'll just to reiterate, we will do some Q&A, but I'm kind of watching the chat, and so I saw Class mention that the beauty of Backup Buddy was that you could rescue a site where you only have access to WordPress and not the server, and that's the fun thing about this is that once you've established a connection to the server with Solid Central, then if you lose access to WordPress, you can still do all of the above here
Yeah,
right from Solid Central.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah. Okay, so I'll hit continue, and now I'll let you talk.
Yeah, so at this point, we need to select the destination of where this is going to end up. So the beard, which should be no surprise, is the name of that site. We're going to select the beard there.
I'm
This is
pretty, yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure people have seen this before. Right now,
yeah,
we've
it's
used
pretty
it for
simple.
demos. The front end of the site is not interesting at all, but just to show, that's what it looks like today. And
Yeah,
so, okay, so we've selected that as the target.
yeah.
And then,
Just a quick prompt to make sure everybody's aware. This is the action that you're taking. This is the source. This is the destination. And just a little reminder there that if something does go wrong, we can restore to an earlier backup. And that's kind of to David's point just now as well, in terms of like if you do lose access to WordPress, because the site is connected to Central, you've still got these tools that you can leverage to recover from that situation.
yeah, both sites have already been backed up. So we're not,
Yeah,
and we're not, although this is destructive, it's not it's
yeah,
not a permanent oh, wow, look at that. I clicked
yeah.
the button. Here we go.
So this card in the timeline will really give you a live update of the status of the migration, taking you through each of the steps. So obviously initially you've got the file and database sync, which is important. You've got the search and replace, the actual string replacement, to make sure that the temporary URL is replaced with the actual URL that you want to use. And the same again for the final URL. And then there's the cleanup operation at the end, which is really just making sure things are taken care of in terms of like, more of a central side as well.
Yeah.
And any, cleanup that needs to be handled as part of what the migration itself generates. So yeah, making sure we clean up afterwards.
Yeah, now this is a super tiny site, and although it does have kind of like an interesting set of code on the destination end, the one that's going away has some complexity to it. The one that we're actually migrating from is very simple, and
Yeah,
so it shouldn't take long, and that was partly um, why we wanted to give it a run here today. So
yeah,
we have some stuff happening in the background, and ideally this would go pretty quickly. And there's a chance that we may run into a snag here because, of course, it's a live demo. So,
yeah,
but yeah, you can see this is a very small site.
yeah. Yeah, full disclosure, we had a couple of bumps in the road earlier around the final steps of the migration, so it could be that we're experiencing that again here. But yeah, this is generally the process you can expect to follow when a
Yeah,
migration happens.
yeah. So I've got the beer.ithem.es. So here's the origin site, which is academydemo.ithem.es,
Yeah,
and then here is the beard. Now, if I refresh this, I think we're going to probably
yeah.
let's see.
It's still in progress at the moment, so
Yeah, it's still in progress. Okay, cool.
it's
Yeah,
typical when you broadcast live, isn't it?
as soon as we're demoing live, yeah.
Yeah, we
Um,
did like three test runs of this before we got on the call, so
yeah, yeah, classic. All right, cool. So this is a piece that is going to run for just a minute. So while we're letting this run, and then who knows, we might see a snag or not. Hopefully not. But what I would like to do, can you? Does it make sense for us to talk a little bit about where environments fit into this? Like, look at
yeah,
that. Okay, so it's
yeah,
showing disconnected. So that's
yeah. It's a disconnect that's caused the problem, I think.
yeah, I think so. Let's see. It's actually connected because as soon as I refreshed it, it was there. So let's see.
Yeah.
Earlier when we did this, it it was already the destination was already. Oh, you know what? I wonder if we have any caching turned on. That would be funny. In any case, okay. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. But does it make sense to talk about what role environments play and why environments are so interesting for this process and for Central moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, environments is that extra piece which, to the point about WP Engine and other hosts that was made in chat earlier, that having the staging, development as well as production environments gives you the ability to organize the kind of myriad number of sites that you have in your central account into those different, containers or like contexts. So you can clearly identify what your production environments are, and likewise for staging and for dev as well. I just want to quickly answer a question actually, just before we get too deep into that. There was just a question about the size limit of the migration. There's no size as such. It's just we have a cap at the moment in terms of the time. So I think 3 hours is the ceiling for how long a migration is allowed to take. But yeah, it's a lot of it's dependent on obviously the disk speed and the network speed of the host in question. So that's additional factors. But yeah, there's no artificially kind of enforced ceiling in terms of size of the migration. It's just more how long is that going to take, given all the different servers and network connections that are at play. So yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that one. But yeah, environments is basically, as I said, you'll be able to categorize your various sites into the type of environment that they are. You'll be able to switch between environments quickly. There'll be new elements in the site header, sorry, in the central sites header to do those switches. And of course, you'll be able to just quickly deploy between different environments, which is what we touched on earlier. So you've got something on dev or staging that needs to go to production, you can just fire off a deploy between the environments really quickly with a really simple UI to do that. So environments is kind of the third piece of this triple piece really of migrations, deployments, and environments. Our intention is to ship all of this as a package rather than drip feeding each one. They're very much all interconnected. So yeah, that's the
Yeah.
plan.
So this is an interesting piece. I've brought this up. Now I don't. Are you okay if we show? These are
Yeah, go for it.
what I'm showing right now, just for you watching. This is from our design tools. So this is not actually live anywhere as of right now because this is in development. But just to give you some sense of how this works. I will. This is one of the kind of interesting pieces of environments that I think is worth mentioning here. Currently, you know, we're showing a migration from a site that we connected to Central to another site that's connected to Central, and that's the only option we have for deployments currently as well. But let's go back to the sort of fictional DaveGreen.com that we were talking about earlier. So let's say
Hmm.
that you have, Dave, you have a persistent staging.davegreen.com. You have a persistent dev.davegreen.com where you're doing some, you know, deeper development work that's not even, you know, for staging. And then of course
Yeah.
you have your production site. Um, if we were using the classical Solid Central model, if I wanted to manage all of those and be able to use any kind of, you know, site to site tools, that would be three sites in Solid Central. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So can
Yeah.
we talk about what it means for us to be able to support environments now inside of Central as opposed to having three separate sites?
Yeah, it's just that reduces the time that you need to um move between those different environments, you know, in terms of, you know, making your deployments, in terms of um knowing what you have, you know, for
Yeah.
each site.
If
It's
there are plugin updates, for example, or even
yeah.
vulnerabilities, you know, or whatever there might be.
Yeah, there's no need to go into three separate contexts, you know, within Central, you know, three separate places, three individual single site views. This is all going to be presented to you, you know, within that same site view, but you'll have it broken down by, you know, the environment that it relates to.
Yeah, very good. So this is like a setup process. Do you want to talk about what I'm looking at here, or what we're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say again, not all of the designs that we're walking through are necessarily final, and some of them have changed a little bit. But yes, essentially, when you're adding a new environment, just prompt people to make a selection about, you know, what type of environment is this. There's also going to be, in addition to production staging and development, there's also going to be a way to mark which environment is the primary, because not everybody's environment will be, you know, in terms of the context of primary, that won't be the same for every single person. You may not actually have an active production environment at this time. You may have gone, you know, you've built your MVP on dev, you've moved to staging to kind of heavily QA that before you release. At that point, your primary is actually staging, so you've got
That
the
makes
ability
sense.
to quickly mark which of those environments is actually your primary at that time. And then when you do eventually do deploy to production, you can just jump in and switch your primary to production. And that
And
obviously, you know, changes the view and the presentation accordingly.
yeah, so can you talk about what it means, like what it means for something to be primary
It's really just in terms of how that's surfaced in the UI more than
in
anything.
Solid Central,
It's
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
there's no kind of functional difference. It's more of it's more of a presentational thing in Central.
Yeah, very good. Cool. So then I might choose one of the environment types, and I think in this design we're choosing staging. So I'm adding a staging environment, I think is the idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And then I've got to connect a new site option here, and it thinks about the site in this case. I think this refers to the staging site itself. Let's say, is
Yeah, I
that
think it's
correct?
important to differentiate here as well. There's just two contexts. There's marking an existing site that you have as an environment, but there's also
Ah,
onboarding a new site that you're connecting to Central and also declaring at that point which environment type is this. So yeah, there's two
okay.
different scenarios.
And I will say, this is my first time seeing these designs, y'all. I haven't seen this yet either. So I think you just pointed out something I hadn't really given much thought to, which is for someone that might have already connected, they might be using Central right now and they have staging dot whatever and production already connected as separate sites. What I think I'm hearing you say is like, once you go to like the production, let's say the main the site that is going to be the primary, and you say I want to connect the other site as an environment of this, then we're actually kind of bringing that existing Solid Central site under the as an environment for the primary site
Yeah,
at that point.
yeah,
Ah, cool. And so the alternative is I've got something that isn't yet connected to Central, and I think that's what we're showing in the design here, which
yeah,
is yeah, hey, I've got a different site. So
yeah.
and then okay, you want to talk about what's next?
Yeah, I think if we can maybe look at some of the yeah, let's move on because not all of these slides in this view are in the same order, but there's
Ah,
some
okay.
variations on these. If we have a look, maybe if we flick through, yeah, so you get a nice confirmation when you've added the new environment. If we could maybe find these, yeah, so there's a couple of variations on the switcher here that
Ah,
you'll
okay.
see in these slides. So that's an idea. Once in going back to the point about the primary, for example, your primary will be the site that's listed in the bar that you see at the top there. So you wouldn't see your non-primary environment as the first there. The primary will always be the one that appears there. But yeah, there's basically two elements. And you'll see in one of the slides, there's an element in the if you like the site header. If we keep flicking through, there's an element that appears, there you go, on the right hand side over there. So that's the kind of like nobody's actually got an environment in place at this point. That's what you
I
use
see.
to trigger that initial process. But once you've got an environment, then the bar at the top that you just saw, the full width bar a few slides back, that's what
Yeah.
you'll see in terms of the switcher, and also giving you the ability to add more environments from that UI up there. So you can see like the star over there, that's the primary mark, so you can toggle that on and off, and obviously the plus icon over to the right, that's
That's
additional.
where you add more. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
um,
this is the switcher. So that what this means is that it's like currently I'm looking at the production site, but if I have, and this shows this, if I'm interpreting this correctly, this means I could have multiple environments connected as classified as staging, and I
yeah,
could have multiple environments if I wished. Not that anybody would
yeah,
need to or be required to, but you could. You're not limited to just one staging, let's
exactly,
say.
exactly. You could have. I know it's popular in development sometimes to have an environment per like feature branch that you're working on, and you might want people to individually be able to review and QA those. If you've got that set up, you can reflect that with environments. There's no arbitrary limit on the number of environments people can spin up.
Nice. And then if I make a change here and say like I switch from production and I choose one of these staging environments, then um, am I correct then that what happens is that everything that I'm looking at here, with the exception of maybe the URL, but everything that I'm looking at here is actually going to be related then to the environment that's active in the switcher right up top. Is that right?
Yeah, it'll just switch you to the view for that environment. So it just means you can just quickly, whip through them if you need to do a review of all your environments and do some quick tasks on each one. You can just fire through these
Yeah. And so that means
quickly.
that, like, for example, the timeline is going to be unique to the environment that I'm looking at, right?
Yeah,
The backups next gen information will be related to that environment.
yeah,
And the other tabs that we have. So I'll be able to see information related just to the environment that's active right now.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then this is
Um,
just, I guess we're showing some management here. So we can either add or remove.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. There's some management tools there, which that relates to the cog icon that you saw up
oh,
in the
okay.
top
Yeah.
right. But again, not everything in this UI is 100%.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
got we've got our man John working through this at the moment, making good progress. We're constantly reviewing for any UI polish and UX kind of improvements we can make. But yeah, largely this is locked in, and we're just working through the dev at the moment on this. So
Oh, this is cool too. I'm now noticing that if I'm adding an environment for the first time, then it's asking me how to label the environment I'm already looking at. So that's
yeah,
kind of cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
because at that point, the environment that you're in at that point before you add the next one isn't labeled as anything. So it
Yeah.
just gives you that chance to quickly label both at the same time.
No, that's very cool. All right, cool. And I'm sure there's other stuff in here, and I don't know my way around the designs all that well. So is there anything else you wanted to show that you want me to kind of skip to?
I think that's probably it, to be honest. It's largely the changes in the header and the top bar. There's the management changes, there's the add new environment flow. I think we've covered everything, to be honest.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and I
And
was
there is some
just
duplication in these slides as well. There's a couple of slides that actually relate to the same thing, and they're just like variants on it. So, yeah,
I gotcha. All right, cool. So, I was gonna just try to take a peek and see if the migration that we kicked off earlier is finished up. Interestingly, it is now showing academy.demo.itham.es up here. So,
yeah,
it looks like that's refreshing. So we may or may not be able to see. Okay, yeah. So it looks like there was an error. That might be because of that change we made to the URL. So
yeah,
it looks like we did hit a snag there. Um, so that's a bummer. But I think we saw the main piece. The sort of last bits would be that we once because we were using this as a migration, that once the migration is complete, I think that, like, I always thought of this as like I need to go look at the thing that got migrated and make sure it looks right, right?
yeah,
I want to make sure that that actually is before I say, hey, I probably, let's say I'm moving to a new host, which is kind of the use case here, right? I'm
hmm
migrating from host A to host B. I want to see, like, I got a WordPress install at host B already, but it was just a temporary one. And so before I change DNS or do anything like that, I want to make sure that what's sitting there, uh, when I hit the button, is actually the new site, not the old one. Okay, and so yeah, you can actually see that that the migration did complete. Um, but because I just refreshed the beer.itham.es, and you'll see I just got redirected back to
yeah,
academy.demo.itham.es. Yeah. So, so
yeah.
that's an
It's a couple of
interesting,
steps that haven't finished probably because of the error that's been thrown. But
yeah.
speaking of errors, actually, if you just open that view error modal, it's worth mentioning that yeah, if you just expand.
Oh, yeah. This is that
Um,
Redis config issue with, so it was,
Oh yeah,
ah,
this is an
okay.
issue with the WP config file hasn't been able to be written to, so that's it. That one error has held the rest of it up. So we'll look
Yeah.
at that. But yeah, I mean, as you can see here, any information as to the why it's failed will be surfaced in here, so that gives you something actionable, whether you can action that yourself or whether you need to contact support, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That is surfaced there. So
And if I weren't happy because like maybe, I might be able to just start the migration over or whatever, but then now I've got this issue down here. So this is where I would just come back here and I would just go to the timeline, which of course this is acting like it's not connected, but in fact it still is connected. I just actually don't think I've been backing this site up here. Yeah, I had already borked the backups for that site previously. So in the case
yeah,
of a rollback here, where I had purposely borked the backups to this site, and I'll say this is because I test with this site on multiple Solid Central accounts all the time. So what's actually the case is that this site is actually backed up by Backups NextGen, but it's in a different Solid Central account, and this Solid Central's attempt to back up failed. So, but what all I would do is just restore, and the site would come right back to what it had been before, if there were an actual failure in the migration. In this case, the migration actually succeeded, but we just have an
yeah,
anomaly there because of the change that we made here. So, so in any case, I think this is kind of cool. So I think one of the things that may come up is like is that um, uh, maybe this isn't a tool that you would choose if you weren't already using Solid Central and Backups Next Gen for at least one of the sites, right? If I'm migrating from host A to host B and I'm not already using Solid Central and Solid Backups Next Gen on host A, then
hmm
I don't know, this might not be the migration tool I would use. But since I've already got the server connection established here, and I know that on host B, I'm planning to continue to use Solid Central. And so I know I want to connect Backups Next Gen to continue to back up the site on the
yeah,
new host. Then all I really have to do is establish the new server connection, just like I would need to do anyway. And now I
hmm
can let this do the migration for me.
yeah,
And then I think that's where the interesting piece comes up for a migration. You mentioned cleanup earlier.
hmm
If I'm truly migrating, let's say academy demo.itham.es, let's say I'm moving it from host A to host B, if you're following along at home, you may have noticed I now have two sites connected to Central that are essentially the same site, but
Hmm.
only one of them is the real site. And
Yeah.
so, can you talk about like that cleanup step, like what happens there?
Yeah, we basically, I mean, obviously the DNS factors into this a little bit as well, but yeah,
Yeah,
we
for sure.
basically need to ensure that the site that you've migrated from, that that gets disconnected from Central, and that we update everything in Central to confirm that this one that you've migrated to, that is actually the de facto, primary site here in this situation. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think so. One of I remember some of the conversations that were had when we were talking about engineering for all of that, and like when you think about it, in the case of moving, migrating from one host to another, if you've got, let's just say DaveGreen.com, right? You're moving from host A to host B. In Central, you've had DaveGreen.com connected. It's been getting backed up. You have a
Hmm.
timeline. You have your history of updates and backups, NextGen, daily backups, and all those kinds of things. And in reality, now you've added a new site to Central. You've connected it. Now you've done the migration, and you may have actually backed up the destination site, host B,
Hmm.
once or twice, depending on how long you had the hosting account active and when you connected it, and all that. So there may or may not be a backup over there, but really, I don't care about those backups. Once I've done the migration, I still want DaveGreen.com to be DaveGreen.com, and I want my timeline to
Yeah.
be from the original site.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to have to look at it and go, wait, which one is the real? So the final cleanup actually eliminates one of the sites,
Yeah.
and I keep all my timeline entries from
Yeah.
the
There's a back end
original.
update.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I keep my server connection to the new site. So it's doing quite a bit of little magic in the background that's kind of
Yeah.
intuitive, and yet under the hood, like there's some complex stuff going on to make all of that
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Um, so
Make
I
make
think,
sure that in all kind of, for all intents and purposes, that is the same connection that you had before, that your backups are the same as what you had before. Everything is quite literally migrated across, not just in a file and DB sense, but in a central sense. We're migrating things within central itself, and that's the big part of the cleanup at the end. Yeah.
yeah, it would be terribly weird to find that I had, my backups were in a weird place or whatever once I finished the migration process. So I think the only steps that we weren't able to show here today are just the DNS piece, as you said. Like
Hmm.
it'll tell you like, hey, it's time to go change the DNS, so you need to point, your domain now to the new host. Once you've done that, you click a button, and then it does the final cleanup step for you, and
Yeah.
handles all that automatically.
I think it's worth as well just clarifying in terms of deployments, back to what we said earlier in terms of the non-destructive aspect on the source on the original site. Everything remains the same in central when you do a deployment in terms of the
Yeah.
source and the destination. They keep their state, if you like, in central as it was. There's no change there.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of that, now that we had kind of a look at the environment's designs, at least, I know it's being developed, but now that we've had a look at that, I think it starts to make more sense what the deployment will look like. I'm just going to deploy from staging, up to production,
Yeah.
or maybe from development to staging, or from one environment
Yeah.
of one kind to another, whatever. But yeah, both continue to exist. So both have been backed up. They have their own timelines, and so that means that if like after the deployment, I'm like, actually, no, I want to roll back to what was, in the destination a couple of days
Hmm.
ago. I could just go back to the timeline that's still sitting there,
Yeah.
look at the backup, hit restore, and it basically undoes the deployment.
Yeah. And there's no need for you to use an additional tool to do that task. It's baked into, your central experience at that point.
Yeah, yeah. So I saw the question about the 3 gig database. Ben Bradley brought that up, and we can comment about that a little bit further. There's actually not a problem with a 3 gig database itself. But anyway, let's come back to that in just a minute, which we'll do. I'm not seeing anything else in Q&A. So if you do have a question, go ahead and throw it in the Q&A. And in the meantime, Dave, one of the things that I always liked to do when I was
Should we
the
tease?
I was going to say, when I was a product owner for Solid, I always loved to talk to the Academy folks about some of the stuff that was coming.
Yeah.
Do you have something to tell
Um,
us about?
I do, and I'm going to do it in reverse order to what I originally planned. So,
Oh,
um,
okay. All right.
first of all, just in terms of central, and this was something that was on your roadmap, so we're honoring that, David, here.
Ah, thank you, my
We're
friend.
going to make some performance improvements in central for when bulk site refreshes are taking place. At the moment, it's not as performant as it could be. We're going to basically improve things so that if you were to paginate through your lists of sites, and then maybe you go from page one, you refresh page one, but you actually move to page two, will allow it so that there's essentially a queue system for those refreshes, so that you don't have to wait, for page two to happen to load up, because you've already got page one's, queues for the refresh taking place. So we're kind of calling it bulk site refresh performance update. So that's a little improvement that'll be coming over the summertime
And
for.
that matters too, even just like when you first log in to
Yeah,
Central. If you have more than say 100 sites or whatever, if you have a lot of sites connected to Central, that update process is a little. It works great with smaller numbers of sites, but it isn't always as fast. And that's when you have larger numbers. I should finish that sentence.
yeah,
But the other thing is that if you do what I have sometimes done, which is hit refresh, or if you're like me and you have like 47 Firefox windows and Central is open in, a
yeah,
tab in like three or four of them, and you're like, which window was I just in? And then you go, oh, look at the other
yeah.
tab. You don't know that you're doing this, but you're actually kicking off another site refresh.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's two situations. There's the pagination context here, where you've got a list of results. You do a bulk refresh, and obviously, that in itself needs to be more performant. But maybe you've already got a whole page um, of refreshes in the queue, but then you really want to go and refresh one specific site, that in that moment you need to get the information on that quickly. The action of you doing that individual refresh would then move that refresh to the top of this refresh queue. I mean, the queue system already exists. This is just like, more under the hood refactors to make it more performant in this kind of bulk context. But yeah, say you've got 50 sites all having, refresh requests in the queue, and you want to refresh one specific site just to get that information that you need and get that peace of mind about that specific site. That will go straight to the top of the queue as part of this feature. So yeah, it's something
Nice.
we're looking at for the summertime, roughly.
And yeah, and
um
one thing I didn't understand for a long time was that it actually does an individual reconnection. Essentially, it's not really truly a reconnection, but it does reach out. Central reaches out to each one of those sites individually,
yeah,
for that refresh action. And so I think
yeah,
it's really neat to be able to manage the queue in that way that you're talking
yeah.
about. That's very cool.
Yeah, it's good for both parties. It makes the experience nicer for us in terms of the infrastructure here that has, but it's also nicer for the user in Central to be able to, get the refreshes that they need in that moment and have those prioritized above any of the refreshes that are already in the queue. So nice little performance update there.
I'll just mention one thing too, Dave. This happened before you and I even met, actually. But there was a scenario about 6 months ago. I don't remember the exact timeline where there were some server performance issues that caused Central to go down. Some of you all will remember Central was
Hmm.
unavailable for a few hours at a time on a couple of different days, and it was it was yuck.
Yeah,
And at that point in time, the team started actually fixing and sprucing up is probably a better way to say it, because there wasn't anything really broken as much as there were. It was a traffic jam. Like these refreshes at scale brought Central down. It was that crazy. So a lot of work began back then, and there were some improvements that were made. So we've actually seen performance enhancements to Central, especially for people with large numbers of sites. We had people
yeah,
managing like 500 or 1,000 sites that were
yeah,
especially hurting back at that time. And so a lot of those changes have already started to show up, and
yeah,
and there's no big announcement about it. It just is, some
yeah.
ongoing work. Yeah.
Some of the work has already been done. This is just a continuation of that work, really building on top of it. I just want to take a moment just to address Stacey's question in chat, or her point in chat. Um, I don't know your specific circumstances, but we are tracking a couple of issues which we have changes kind of open and in QA to test to basically help mitigate some connection issues with Central that we've been experiencing over the past week or two. So again, Stacey, I don't know your specific case, but there's a chance that the things that we are working on may, Yeah, if you've been reporting them to support, there's a strong chance it's one of the 3 or 4 tickets that I've had in triage this past couple of weeks. So stand by. Hopefully, at least one of these changes will contribute to that. So
I'm
yeah,
so glad you brought
we
this
are
up.
aware.
Yeah,
We are
thank you,
aware.
Stacy. Thanks for mentioning it, and Dave, thanks for addressing that too, because we've had discussions in the Academy Slack, and you and I, of course, have talked about it, Dave, also. But I'm really glad. I don't know. Awesome Paul, as always, is awesome. Is asking if there's a need to resubmit those issues. I don't think there's a need to resubmit. But Dave, do you have any comment on that? Let me actually let's clarify one thing. Paul, did you already submit a ticket or one or more tickets related to that? And that was yeah, the application password is coming up. So
Mhm.
okay, I see, Paul. You stopped submitting tickets. So the application password has come up, and I saw Sue, I think, was the most recent to post in the Academy Slack about this. And Dave,
Mhm.
now that you've met people, we might just invite you to the Academy Slack. Um,
Yeah, full disclosure, I have been so busy trying to fill David's shoes that I have not got around to getting into the Academy Slack, and that's his fault. I'm blaming him
It
squarely for
is
that.
totally,
But
it's absolutely, I
um,
barred you from entry, actually.
I tell you
I did not.
something,
Yeah.
you and I are at WordCamp Europe next week. I will commit now to getting into the Academy Slack by the end of next week. Is that good enough for you, David? Can we
I
can we do
listen.
that?
It's not me that you're going to have to answer to. It's but yeah.
Yeah.
So the application password is kind of an interesting one because it started to become required for application passwords when you connected a new site to Central. I think it was summertime last year. It was while we built what we called the Smart Site Connection Flow. I don't think we ever labeled it that way in public, but there was you might have noticed that like Central connecting a new site to Central radically changed and it got much easier
Mhm.
with the addition of the application password, which is a piece that was not required before in the previous connections to Sync and then Central. But now what's with that application password, it's actually a lot more stable overall.
Yeah.
But if you had a site that was connected to Central before that change, before the application password was required, and you recently had a disconnection and attempted to reconnect a site, it would absolutely require the application password. And some are now running into an issue that we addressed and largely got resolved last year, which was that if you had a certain solid security configuration going, I have a cat actually manipulating the tripod that my camera is sitting on. It's hilarious. So if it looks like there's an earthquake here, it's just a cat.
Yeah, you're
Um,
good.
the solid security you'll want to double check if you're trying to reconnect a site to Central and you are seeing an application password situation or you're just seeing a failure. Go check solid security and make sure that application passwords are enabled. And if you have a question about how to do that, drop me a note in the Slack or pop me an email. And we'll get you fixed up there. It's a super simple, quick fix to make, but an older solid security configuration would have disabled application passwords, and then you'd be running you'd be in this mess. And I think that happened to a couple of folks. I know for a fact it happened to a couple of folks earlier in the last week or so. And Sue, I mentioned that I think in Slack earlier today, and I haven't looked, so you may have updated us there. But exactly where is that setting? I tell you what, Sue, I'll track that down while Dave continues to tease, because you've got more
Yeah,
things to
sure.
tell us about, right?
Yeah, I've got two more items. So another piece that we're going to be bringing is that when you request an update for a site in Central, so whether that's WordPress core, plugins, themes, etc., we will be releasing an update this summer. I'm hoping next month, but we'll see. It's certainly over the summer to automatically take a backup at that point immediately before that series of updates takes
And
place.
by automatically, you mean I don't have to like do anything for that to happen
No, as long
myself?
as the request is made in Central, and we will listen for that and take a backup accordingly. That's the
Nice.
kind of MVP of the feature. A future release, like a kind of an iteration on that, will look to intercept those requests that are happening within the WP admin and basically take the same action. So the MVP is whenever you request an update in Central, the future release to follow on from that will be we'll do some work to make that happen whenever somebody in WP admin makes a similar update request. We'll basically say like, hold on, we have to take this backup. Backup's good. Let's proceed with the update. So WordPress
I
update
love that.
backups.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, for those of you that update production in production.
That'll be a next gen piece as well, by the way, just to clarify.
Yeah, yeah. So NextGen is just going to automatically take a new backup before your upgrade runs, before your plugin update runs,
Yeah,
or theme
absolutely.
or WordPress core, right? So it'll just give you a slightly newer backup because you should have had one from the night before or from
Yeah,
within the last 24 hours anyway. But this will just grab a new quick snapshot with no user interaction required, right?
yeah, absolutely. Because
That's very cool.
some people have a workflow, and I've again, and I'm sure David, you have as well. I've lived and breathed this in the past, where ideally, you spin up staging, you do your updates in staging, and then if you're happy with how things have worked in staging, you then go and do it in production. That's a great workflow, still a valid workflow, but it's not for everybody. Some people are just happy with, yeah, I've got a restoration point here. I'm just going to go ahead with the update. And if something goes wrong, I'll just roll back. Some people are happy with that flow as well. Both are perfectly valid. And in this case, it just means that, yeah, that gives people the option to go down that second route instead of maybe spinning up the usual like staging to production workflow. So, but yeah, all automated, nothing else to do. Just go ahead
That's
and request an update in Central as you always would, and we'll listen for that and take the backup accordingly.
That's so great. I'll just take a quick moment. Thanks for sharing that, by the way. I wanted to just quickly point out. So, Sue, I see someone pointed this out in chat, but if you're watching the recording or you want to just see how to do this, you just want to go to the user group for your user. So, keep in mind that the user that you were authenticated or that you're going to authenticate with for your site, so your WordPress user, when you connect to Central. So if you're trying to connect a site either for the first time or you're reconnecting and you're running into this application password issue, when you kick off the connection from Central, you're going to be required to authenticate with WordPress if you're not already signed in. So if you are already signed into your site, then just come in here and check to make sure that whichever user group your WordPress user is in has the application passwords enabled. So this is the setting here. So you're going to go to user groups, select. Now in this case, this site I've only got super admins and everybody else. So I'm a super admin. So that's the user group that matters here. If I flip over to everybody else, you'll see application passwords are disabled. But
Mhm.
if I'm in the user group that my user is in, application passwords are enabled, and that's what you want to just confirm. And yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I think to Stacey's point as well earlier, in terms of WordPress core and application passwords, if you haven't got solid security, you're going to be presented with the application password with flow anyway. It's just
Yeah.
that security takes steps to, I guess, disable that by default. Dave is probably the best way to put it, and then allows you to
Yeah. I
use the user groups to enable that. So,
I'm
yeah,
fuzzy on the what the default setting is now. It's been so long since I was
yeah,
actively looking at this. But application passwords are a core WordPress feature. They are baked into WordPress. You don't need solid security to have them. They've
yeah,
been in WordPress core since I think about 2001, if I remember correctly. And so lots of different apps make use of them. But solid security is not the only plugin that allows you as a security admin or as a site admin to limit
hmm
who can use application passwords. So that's
yeah,
really the feature that's in solid security, is that it gives you the ability to decide who can and cannot use an application password. So
yeah,
if you don't have solid security on the site and you're not seeing the authentic, you won't actually see much about the application password in the connection flow. All it does is say, hey, authenticate if you're not already connected. And if you
yeah,
are already connected, either way, you'll still see a approve this connection step. The
yeah,
approve this connection step in your WordPress admin is actually the application password step. You just may or may
absolutely.
not realize that. So
Just for
yeah.
just to highlight that as well, when I spun up the two test sites that we've used in the demo that we've tried today, Solid Security was not on either of the sites that I connected to Central at that point. I saw the approval UI in WordPress and I was able to accept that and complete the connection flow. So yeah, Solid Security, if you don't have that on um, the sites in question, and to David's point, you don't have something else, third-party code snippet, plugin, whatever, that's disabling application passwords, then you should see that approval UI interface and be able to accept that no problem when you do the connection again. So,
And
yeah,
that's only if you've disconnected the site
Yeah.
from Central, or if it's a situation where your site was originally connected to Central before the application password step was there. So in other words, if you've already approved a connection previously, which in effect uses an application password, then you won't be presented with the approval step again. And I'm seeing Stacy saying she was
Yeah.
not given that step. One way, here's a simple way to tell if you have an application password set up. If you, I can reshare my screen real quick. I'll show you. I'll show you exactly what it looks
Yeah.
like. And
I'll just
Dave,
say as well, while David's spinning that up, we'll make a note of this and see if we can document this a little bit better. So
yeah, I feel like there is good documentation. I saw that the support team had done some new documentation around this. But if you go to your profile, so you'll see I'm signed in as Celery Fields volunteers. That's a long story, y'all. You don't want to know. But I'm signed in, and if you go to your profile on the site, so whatever your user profile, you can also go to the users menu and click on your own. You can scroll down and you can see there's an application passwords section, and these are all of the authenticated or approved connections. And you'll see I've connected this site to Central a bunch of times under a bunch of different accounts. And so if you see any entries here at all, it means that you've previously approved with an application password a connection. And if any of them say Solid WP, then that's going to be Solid Central. You can also revoke connections from WP admin. So that's another thing that is a great feature of the new way of connecting to Central, which is that if for whatever reason you and or someone has connected a site to Central and you want to revoke that connection later, you can always do that from the screen. So you've got a lot more power now too. So good. So class, I hope that helps. You get a forbidden. I tell you what, Stacy, I'm first of all not happy to hear that you're not getting supported. And let's jump in. I saw someone else mentioning a screen sharing situation. We may do that after we stop recording here. I know I got to let Dave go. So Dave, why don't let's finish letting you tease anything else that you want to tell us about, and then
yeah.
I'm happy to stay on for a little longer, and maybe we can try to help if anybody wants to stay on and get some live help today.
So the final tease is a Solid Mail Pro offering. So as you'll know, we have Solid Mail, which used to be the WPS SMTP. We are in active development at the moment for a Pro offering. I'm going to tentatively say late summer, early autumn for that.
Okay.
Because we have obviously lots of different business priorities at the moment, but the crux of it is we're going to have a wide variety of kind of message packs available to purchase in multiple tiers at launch. So you'd be purchasing essentially message credits, email credits to use. Um, we're going to offer 1,000 messages on the free tier of the Pro service. And just to say, in terms of the service, this is routing the mail through Solid, through our infrastructure rather than relying on the mail being routed out through your server or the server that the site is hosted on.
Or having to connect to like a third party, like a
Indeed.
SendGrid or an Amazon
Yeah,
SES or one of the third party email service providers, right?
absolutely. Just to pause comment, yeah, services like Postmark, etc. Yeah, so we're basically Solid are doing this. We're going into this space. The message packs are in multiple different tiers, so ranging from your kind of more starter to your pro, your premium, your enterprise. Each pack is purchasable like individually. There's no subscription tied to the pack. Um, you can buy multiple packs to get to the desired number of credits that you would like. However, obviously, as far as the pricing is concerned, it gets more competitive, as you go up the scale. So it might be that instead of buying 2 packs of credits, actually the larger pack is actually the most competitive for you. These credits never expire. So once you purchase them,
Nice.
that's it. They're associated with your account and you can use them. So, you might want to buy in bulk to try and last a year. You might want to buy in bulk just to last the quarter, whatever your need is. Just buy what you need and they'll never go away. It won't be a case where it rolls over at month end and goes back to zero. Absolutely not at all. We're going to be offering automatic onboarding of domains in terms of the DNS updates for those domains via a service that we're going to be using called Entry. So every pack that you buy, you'll be able to onboard a domain using that service, which is great. That's all baked in. The cost of that is baked into the plans.
Also, I'll
And
just mention on that note real
yeah,
quick, like that's often the most painful part of setting up any email service provider. You have to get all of
yeah,
those DNS records figured out so that your SPF, DMARC, DKIM, like you're in compliance with all these different, and to have it just
absolutely.
magically done. I
Yeah,
love that. Yeah.
entry's amazing. We've been spending a lot of time over the last few weeks reviewing the onboarding flow for a new domain, for a new mail sending domain into the service. So yeah, we're making a lot of small changes to make sure that is like polished and just ready for prime time once this goes live. Just to Paul's question in chat, which is I was actually just about to move on to. Originally, we were going to ship as account level quotas and then come to the ability to assign quotas to individual sites post launch. Pleased to reveal that after conversations we've had this week, we're adjusting the timeline slightly because we want to make sure that we ship that feature as part of the MVP of Mail Pro. So when Mail Pro goes to market and we ship that, you will be able to assign individual quotas to individual sites that you have in Central, and you'll be able to see, where each site is at in terms of their quotas usage. So we've moved things around a little bit just to make sure that we had a bit more value to the initial like launch
So,
for
so that means I
bulk
could do it
bulk
either
site.
way. Is
Yeah,
am I understand? Okay, so what I love about that, and this is really important for this group especially, right, is that you might have your own internal credits, and you might be billing clients separately, or having, so the
yeah.
ability to assign a certain, this gives you the ability to limit a client. If a client is
Yeah.
say only allowed to use however many emails, and they exceed their limitations, then you have a way to monitor and respond to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's worth saying as well, we're going to be incredibly, I guess, vague or generic in terms of in the WP admin where the plugin's installed. We're going to be careful in terms of the messaging, the wording that we use to surface, like what's the connection status. So we're not going to say in the WP admin, hey, you've run out of credits. It's going to be something much more generic, like, please contact your administrator, or we haven't quite polished the wordsmithing on this yet, but yeah, the wording will be generic enough so that people don't get too specific information in their connection status messages. But yeah, definitely the ability to assign quotas to the sites that you have. Ultimately, your account level quota is like, that's the kind of daddy in terms of what happens. But yeah, on an account level, you'll be able to do that and say, I've got 10 clients, I want them to use 10,000 each. That's their allowance. You'll be able to do that in Central, no
Love
problem.
that.
So
Very cool.
Solid's moving into the kind of premium best in class email deliverability space. That's a mouthful. Um, but yeah, it's a big deal for Solid. It's something we're all really excited about. So yeah, that'll be coming soon.
Nice. That's very cool. All right. Anything else you want
And
to tease?
that's it. And I'll just clarify soon is again kind of summer, early autumn kind of time.
All right. Well, that's awesome. I appreciate that. I have just dropped a poll, which I hope you can see. Are you looking? Are you seeing a poll on your screen? Anyone? I don't know. It's been a while
I
since I
just
used
saw
this
one pop
feature.
up. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So if you are interested in having early access to migrations, let me know. Just respond to the poll real quickly, and separately, because environments is coming separately. So like there's a possibility, if I'm not mistaken, Dave, there's a possibility that we could get people early access to migrations and deployments that already exists right now. But then with the new environments and the whole kit and caboodle coming out, I think you said summertime. If I or did you specify a time
Yeah,
frame? I don't.
so
Yeah.
in terms of when everything goes to market, when we ship, that the whole triple piece of migrations, deployments, and environments is going to go out at the same time. However, in terms of testing, focus group, kind of closed beta testing, that kind of thing, we are definitely keen to get people that can help us test.
All
So
right.
yes, by all means, if that interests you, get on board. And yes, I am a hooligan, which is a Paul's asked that one. I live in these t-shirts, but yeah, I am a hooligan. Big difference. Recommend it. I'll share my affiliate link in the Academy Slack when I get in there.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, cool. Well, we've got some folks interested in early access, and some folks also interested in potentially being beta testers. So that's great. We'll capture. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. So if you haven't answered, you've got like 10 more seconds to respond there before I shut that down. But really appreciate some responses there, both yes and no's, right? Really appreciate all of that. So that's awesome, and we'll reach out about early access and beta testing as well. Dave, thanks for taking the time. I know we ran over, which that does tend to happen around here. So I appreciate you taking the time. It's good to get you introduced to folks, and of course, you watching as an Academy member, you will start to see Dave make an appearance in the Slack. He's promised that he's going to do that. I will
Yeah,
say,
absolutely.
I didn't say this at the top, but I'll say it now. When I got after maybe what an hour or two, Dave, I don't know. It was our first chance to spend any time at all. I said to him, I'm like, I just want to sit down in a pub somewhere over a pint. Like you're the
Yeah.
kind of person, and I think you will find this to be true. Those of you who are just meeting Dave, you'll find this to be true. And I am so thrilled. At the time, it wasn't even conceivable because we live on opposite sides of the pond. Like there was no chance that was going to be happening anytime soon. And yet here we are. We're going to do it in Switzerland next week.
Yeah,
So anybody that's
absolutely.
yeah, anybody that's going to be at WordCamp EU, we're certainly there. We have a booth. We'll be there. And Dave, what do you think about us popping into the Academy Slack with some maybe some live updates from the event next week? What do you think?
I think it would be rude of us not to engage with the Academy folks while we're over there. We cannot promise that pictures of pints will be totally absent from any updates. I think that's one thing we maybe need to caveat
Yeah, let's
there.
see. I guess we got to double check the code of conduct for the
Yeah,
Academy
yeah.
Slack. I don't know. Well, maybe we move the pints out of the shot. I don't know. We'll have to see about that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Uh, but yeah, no, really glad that you came today, and
Pleasure. Thank you.
yeah, appreciate everyone. Also, you who attended. Really glad to have you here. So many stuck around. I appreciate that very much. If anybody Sue, yeah, you're asking about so Dave, if you need to go, you can go. I don't want to hold you up. I will stick
I'm
around a little
just
longer.
going to say quickly, in terms of email providers that are already listed in, say, Solid Mail currently, we will not be replacing all the existing mail providers and saying, hey, you must use Solid Mail Pro. You can continue using providers that you currently have. Of course, we'd love you to come on board with Mail Pro, and we'll give you our best price for that. But if you want to continue using the providers that you already have configured, by all means, that will not change.
Yeah, absolutely. And through the SMTP connection, you can continue to use any SMTP provider, like
Yeah.
regardless of whether there's explicit support in Solid Mail for that. So the plugin will continue to operate as it does. You'll just have the ability to take advantage of something new. And I love the fact that there's a free tier, so it gives you a chance to try it out and use it.
Yeah, I'm not going to name the competitors, but I can say that we are one competitor in question, which is a very big name, a well-known name. We are offering, I think, 800 more credits on the free tier than our competitor
Oh,
in question. So,
nice.
yeah, we're trying to bring some value in that free plan. So,
Yeah, very good. Very
look
good. Well,
forward to
listen,
shipping that.
yeah, yeah, excited to have you talk about that. Of course, I've known about it, but I don't. We may have hinted about it here. I don't think so, though. We'll see. But yeah, appreciate you being here, Dave. And I will stick around a little bit longer. Anybody that wants to talk about central connection or app passwords or whatever we can address, I will spend a little bit more time here today, and we'll try to help with any of that we can. But Dave, really appreciate you carving out the time. I know it's late for you there in the UK, as
Yeah,
it is
I'm
for
gonna
some of our folks across the pond.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna grab some dinner. I really appreciate you having me. It's been a pleasure talking to everybody, and yeah, I'm just gonna get my head back into solid roadmap work and see what we can deliver for you folks over the next 12 months. So
Love it. All right. Well, you'll be seeing more of Dave. He'll be around. And Dave, I'll look forward to that pint next week.
enjoy your days/evenings, everybody. Take care.
Thanks. Yeah,
Bye bye.
absolutely. Yep. All right, cool. So I'm going to nix the recording at this point, and